Hey everyone, David Aragona here with Craig Milkowski, taking a look at one of the graded stakes events on the undercard of Tampa Bay Derby Day at Tampa Bay Downs Saturday. Race 6 on their 12 race card is the Grade 3 Challenger, going a mile and a 16th for the older runners on the dirt. A field of 6 signed on here, Craig, and I think we're going to have a pretty substantial favorite in the number 3 Skippy Longstocking, but as the name of this race would indicate, this race was a challenge to handicap because it's tough to trust a horse that was eased in its last start at a short price.
Very much so. He's even money on the morning line. Will probably be half of that, in my opinion. And when I looked at his work tab, it's not the strongest I've ever seen. So, yeah, it's, I think, a little more open than what the morning line would project.
Yeah, we'll see what price he goes off at. It's really tough to have a strong opinion about it because it's a little difficult to trust this horse based on his last race in the Pegasus World Cup where he was eased, but he definitely is the class of this field coming back to try to win the Challenger for the second year in a row after winning it at odds of 1-2 in 2023. To get a sense of where Skippy Longstocking might be placed in the early stages of this race, let's take a look at the Timeform US Pace Projector, and the Pace Projector is indicating that he's going to get a pretty good trip, Craig. There's not a ton of speed in this race. It's really just him and the horse drawn all the way on the outside, the number 6 Impacto, who seem like they want to be forward in here. Impacto is a little more of a confirmed front-running type, having been successful using that style a few times in the past, but I don't think Tyler Gaffalione would be upset if Skippy Longstocking has to take back an ankle outside of that one to stalk.
No, I could see it happen in that way. As you said, it's not like Skippy Longstocking is a known front runner. He's had many races where he sat in the second spot, somewhat success. So, yeah, that would be my guess as to how the pace is going to play out. Just switch those top two.
Yeah, you'll note that this pace projector does have the favors front runners flag showing up. That could work against a horse like the number 2 Dynamic One, who does have the LP flag, indicating that he has the highest Timeform US late pace rating in the field. But I think you want to pay more attention to that in races that project to feature a little more pace than this one does. Well, let's go through this field in post position order, beginning with the number 1 Imbagnik, or I think I'm saying that correctly, a horse who won a couple of races at Delta Downs over the winter. Gutting out those victories as a favorite each time, then stepped up in class last time in the Tenacious at Fairgrounds and wasn't really competitive and just feels like he might be a little bit overmatched in this spot as well, Craig.
The speed figures would certainly seem to indicate that. Also, it's not like he's had a ton of success going around 2 turns in this country, with both his races really coming just around the 1 turn, both his wins.
The number 2 is Dynamic One. And as we said, he is one of a couple of horses coming out of that Pegasus World Cup Invitational. He was 7th that day, actually got some wagering support to go off at 11-1 against that competitive field. I think that was largely a function of the fact that he's a Todd Pletcher trainee with Irad Ortiz being his regular rider. That duo teaming up with Dynamic One again this day. Craig, I think the big question with this horse is, can he still run? Because while he did earn a respectable Timeform US speed figure last time in the Pegasus, it's not like he was ever seriously involved in that race, just kind of picking up pieces in a race that was falling apart after they went very quickly up front. And he didn't do much running in his return race from that year-plus layoff to back. So I'm not really sure what to expect from this horse. He once was good enough to beat this field.
He was, and that has a lot to do with his late pace flag as well, races from long ago, more so than his most recent 2. And like you, not like you, I really tried to make a case for this horse, as I'm not a big fan of the favorite in here, but the more I watched his races, I just couldn't see it. I guess if you look strictly at the numbers, he's 3rd off a long layoff. He improved second time out. Maybe he could improve more here 3rd time, but given the pace scenario, he wasn't for me.
You know, I might differ from you a little bit on my odds expectations for this race, Craig. I could see Skippy Longstocking and Dynamic One being much more similar prices in this race than maybe you expect, because these horses were not that far apart on the tote board in the Pegasus World Cup. One was 11-1, the other was 8-1, and Dynamic One at least finished the race. So we'll see how the bettors approach this challenger on Saturday with regard to these two. And speaking of Skippy Longstocking, we'll take a look at his past performances next. I don't really know what to make of the Pegasus World Cup, Craig. Yeah, he had a really difficult post position that day, drawn 12 in a 12 horse field, especially with a race at Gulfstream that goes right into that clubhouse turn at the mile and an eighth distance. Tyler Gaffalione hustled him out of the gate, got him into that position, chasing those two leaders. But you could see as soon as they hit the backstretch, this horse was not taking up the bit, responding in the way that he usually does. Tyler niggled at him a couple of times down the backstretch, and this horse was just finished, and he eased him to the wire. I don't know what to make of that because he had been pretty consistent prior to that with at least showing up and running decent races, achieving some pretty consistent time Formula speed figures along the way. Sounds like the connections didn't have a major excuse coming out of that race. He's worked consistently since then. And if he bounces back, he's going to be tough to beat in this spot, but that seems like a big if.
His best race is definitely tough in here. It looks like to me he missed about a month after, took some time off, has worked 3 times since. His speed figures when he wins, and generally he wins these kind of races toward the lower tier of the graded stake system. They're not really all that much better than the other horses in here. His big figures have come in defeat in higher class races where he was competitive but didn't really get the job done. So I think there's some right to be concerned with him based on that last race. And even if you put a line through that, it's, I mean, he would be the favorite, but I don't know if he towers over a couple of these.
Yeah, I did watch a couple of his workouts since that race, as well as going back to watch his workouts before the Pegasus World Cup. And it seems like that February 24th work was actually stronger than he appeared to be working into the Pegasus World Cup. The time of that work maybe should be a little bit faster. I think he was working with a stablemate that he clearly outworked, but for whatever reason, the stablemate was given the faster time. So maybe he's bounced back since then, but still seems like a tough horse to trust. The number 4 is Sherlock's Jewel. Let's take a look at his last race when he was a winner, going a very similar distance at Tampa Bay Downs, 1.40 miles this day, tackling 1.16 miles on Saturday in the Challenger. And this horse just feels like he's stepped forward since switching to the dirt. For trainer Shig McGahee, spent the entirety of his first 7 starts on the turf. Wasn't really finishing on that surface in his most recent races at the end of 2023. They switched to dirt 2 back at Tampa, won easily, came back and tried it again here. And this wasn't the prettiest victory you're ever going to see. He was hanging on his left lead through the stretch, but he was still able to grind it out. And maybe he's just a better horse on the dirt.
Yeah, it certainly appears that way in his speed figure, even though it wasn't as impressive visually. It took a jump forward last time up to a 118, which is actually a little higher than the race rating for this race, a 117. So I give him a good shot in here. And that last race wasn't the easiest. He's shown tactical speed. He was a bit off the pace. It was more of a moderate flow last time, even though none of the fractions are coded in blue. You could see them ascending throughout the race, and he was still finishing stronger than everyone else.
Yeah, I do wonder if that speed figure 2 back is a little more indicative of his ability than the speed figure last time. It just seems a little high for horses in that race. We've seen the 3rd and 4th place finishers come back to regress. The runner-up came back and ran this week at Tampa Bay Downs and lost at 4-5. So I wonder a little bit about the figure from last time. But if the 2 favorites don't show up, it's definitely open to a horse like Sherlock's Jewel. The number 5 is Dash Attack, and he's one that's going to be looking to get back into form because he really hasn't run well in his last couple of races, particularly last time in the Tenacious when he took some money and was just never really involved in that race, mid-pack early, but dropped out on the far turn and had nothing through the stretch. He didn't get the best trip 2 back in the Fayette when he was wide into the clubhouse turn and always out of position that day. On his best day, he's capable of causing an upset in a race like this, but he's another one that's kind of hard to trust off a poor effort.
Definitely hard to trust. If there's one trainer that could do it, could have a horse run well off those running lines, it would be Ken McPeek, because he runs his horse as often. They don't often fire their best shot, but sometimes they will out of the blue. And it's a race where his best races have come up near the front end. If they're aggressive and he goes to the front, I could see him trying to go wire to wire in here. He's not the horse I eventually landed on, but I don't think he's impossible.
Yeah, and he's one who was raced a lot during 2023, so maybe he just needed that break, and now he's coming off a bit of a layoff here. The number 6, rounding out the field, is Impacto. We'll take a look at his most recent race, a victory, going the mile and 40-yard distance at Tampa Bay Downs, stretching out from a pair of sprints that he contested when he first came to Florida for the winter. And this was a big step forward for this horse. Got to the front end, was able to set moderate fractions, and draws off late. You could see he wins this race quite comfortably as he's just geared down to the wire here. This is a horse that began his career at Century Mile, Century Downs, was running some decent races there, but not necessarily looking like a future graded stakes winner. Was claimed out of the last race by Gerald Bennett, who wins a lot of races during the wintertime at Tampa Bay Downs by Sharp Connections, and they're moving him right up into this graded stakes race, so maybe they're expecting another step forward from this horse.
I would think so. And the pace projector points that he has a shot. He's a horse who we both expect to probably be on the lead in a race that does favor horses. Not a lot of early speed in here. So he certainly has a shot. It's just a matter of if he's good enough to handle this jump up in class.
Well, let's throw up our picks for this Challenger Stakes, and both Craig and I want to get a little bit creative here, taking some shots against those two horses, Dynamic One and Skippy Longstocking, who are probably going to attract most of the support in here. Craig, you're going with the number 4, Sherlock's Jewel, who is one of 2 horses in this race that's actually coming off a victory.
Yeah, and I actually trust that speed figure a little more than you do. It was a day where there were more than one route. It was fairly easy to make. So I'm going to give excuses to the other 2. I think he ran very well that day. I like his dirt form and think he has a good shot at what should be a pretty good price. Before you give your pick, I wanted to note M. Bagnick, who I mentioned. Both his wins were around 2 turns. I forgot it was at Delta Downs where it was sprint distances, but they are those elongated 2-turn races.
And I picked a horse that has a similar profile to Sherlock's Jewel, the number 6 Impacto, who's also coming off a victory against inferior competition. And this seems like a big step up in class first off the claim. But if either of the favorites or both of the favorites don't show up, this race just gets a whole lot easier for a horse like this, who is probably going to be leading this field early. And we'll see if anybody's up to the task of passing him. So at what's likely to be a generous price, I put the number 6 Impacto on top. Craig's got the number 4 Sherlock's Jewel in race 6 at Tampa Bay Downs on Saturday. The Challenger Stakes. Good luck after playing the races this weekend.